All right, so this is page 6-3, steps 5 through 8. This is work I did on November the 1st, and today I'm going to be dimpling the skin. First dimples I'll be making on the real airplane using the C-frame dimpling tool and the pneumatic squeezer. So the first thing I'm doing here is just marking off the holes that I'm not supposed to dimple. So the lower part of the vertical stabilizer, where the fairing attaches, once you assemble the vertical stabilizer to the tail cone, about every third hole, give or take, is not dimpled because that's a hole that will accept a screw for the fairing. So I'm just, being real paranoid here, counting from the top, counting from the bottom, comparing it to the diagram, and marking off. I marked the holes with a Sharpie, and then I decided, I'm going to go back. I'm going to put tape over the holes because, that way I won't get carried away and not notice a Sharpie mark or something. So I go ahead and I mark those, on this the bottom rib here, in spar rib and nose rib. There's also one of the holes on the spar itself, and then I did the same thing with the skin, and now I'm putting the two up against each other, flipped around, but they're symmetrical, and just sort of making sure they all match up, just as an extra sanity check. So here I go over to start setting up the C-frame, put the little platform that I've built, and I start thinking, and I get myself confused. Right here I'm doing something stupid, and what I'm doing is I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get to some of the holes near the leading edge, where the skin is kind of folded. And I know that one or two of them may be difficult to get at. I already realized that. But, it appears because of the platform I've built that really a lot of the dimples near the leading edge are going to be impossible to get to. And that's because I was making the mistake of picturing doing the dimpling with the outside of the skin up. That's not how you do it. This right here, that's how you do it. So the male dimple die goes in the bottom side of the C-frame. The female dimple die goes in the top, in the ram part that you're going to hit. That means that the dimple will end up being concave down, and that would correspond to the manufactured head of the rivet, which is on the outside, flush with the outside of the skin. So I basically just had the whole thing upside down, wasn't thinking about it clearly. So now I've got it figured out. I'm thinking that I can pretty much get to all but maybe the last dimple right up near the leading edge, and for that I've got the pop rivet tool that I can use. So here I go. I'm testing it out. I tried one, dimpled one, pulled it out to look at it, get my little magnifier thing, test it with a rivet. Looks pretty good, and away I go. I start, banging some dimples. Now, all I really have to do on the skin with the C-frame is, kind of the inner area. So the big plus shape you can see on there, the plus shaped pattern of rivets. Anything around the edge I can reach with the squeezer, and that's what I intend to do. But these, I'm working my way right up into that tight area, and at this point I'm having difficulty holding the skin, the area I'm not dimpling, the part that's sticking up. I was having difficulty holding it up and out of the way. So I've gone and gotten my lovely helper here, and she's going to sit on the table and sort of, carefully hold the skin back out of the way. And with her doing that, I'm actually able to get up and get the very last rivet right up in the leading edge, right up basically all of them. So I don't end up having to use the pop rivet tool at all. So that worked out great. So we went ahead and flipped it over and did the other side and start working my way back. And at this point it's going pretty smoothly. It's pretty loud. You can see my wife plugging her ears there. And I'm using probably a bigger hammer than I need to. I think it's like a 2.5 pound sledge, and I'm not hitting. I'm letting the weight of the hammer do really all the work. I may start using a slightly smaller hammer because, frankly, after a while, it got tiring to have to lift the hammer up. The hitting wasn't that hard, but the holding. So, just working my way along here, and luckily, the C-frame was able to reach all of them. All right, so now I'm dimpling the holes around the perimeter of the skin using the pneumatic squeezer. I'm putting the male dimple die in the yoke and the female dimple die in the ram. That way the male dimple die stays stationary and you can insert the tip of the male die into the hole that you're about to dimple, and when you trigger the squeezer, the ram with the female die moves up into position and compresses the material. I did have to switch it around a couple of times, like right there when I get into the sort of tight quarters down near the leading edge, and put the male die in the ram. The danger there, at least with these big parts, is that as you trigger the squeezer, you put the male die, you put the tip of the die in the hole and then trigger the squeezer, and when the ram moves, it tends to push the part away from you. When it's a big part like this skin, it can jump out of the hole, and you might end up, punching a hole in their skin that you didn't want. So here I'm deburring the edges of the skin. After that, I'll be basically done with the skin. I can set it aside until I'm ready to prime and then start riveting things together. So yeah, I do this for a while, then set the skin aside, and then start working on skeleton pieces. So yeah, here I am working on the skeleton. So I take it apart piece by piece, deburr all the holes that I drilled when I match drilled the skeleton to itself and the skin to the skeleton, and then I give each one a little inspection and then set about dimpling the flange holes that made up with the skin. So basically the dimples that I put in the skin will sort of mesh with the holes that I'm putting in the flanges here, and then the rivets will lock everything together. So pretty much just work my way through everything. Now here I'm deburring the holes, the holes in the front spar that match with the skin. I actually got ahead of myself a little bit, or at least I noticed later on in the plans that they tell you to do this, and I thought, well, I'm pretty sure I've already done that, but let me check, and I had. So uh, maybe I don't need to be doing this exact part right here because I'm not going to be dimpling the front spar until several steps later. Actually, a week later, as it turns out. But yeah, it doesn't hurt anything to do it now. So I keep at it and work my way through all the ribs, and time-lapse guy here makes it look like it goes quicker than it does, but it's really satisfying. It's fun. It's fun work, and it's satisfying to make a lot of progress in a day of work on this thing. So I actually did one more step that I'm gonna show in this video. So let's get on to that. So as you can tell by the fact that it's gotten a lot darker outside, some time has gone by, but it's actually just later in the same day, and I decided I would go ahead and do one more step. This is step 8, and basically, the dimples in the skin interlock with dimples in the skeleton for the most part, but in some places, rather than being dimples, it's machine countersunk holes. And case in point, the holes where the rear spar is backed by the spar caps. In fact, the very first parts I made in step 1, double up the thickness or more than double the thickness of the spar flange, in the lower maybe 2/3 to 3/4. And the area where the skin overlaps that, it's too thick to dimple, and so you countersink it, and that's what I'm doing here. So I set up my countersink cage and countersink bit, and that's what I'm doing. I'm removing each cleco from each hole, countersinking, and then moving on to the next one. And I'm not sure if you can tell in here, but I've carefully marked off where I'm supposed to start and stop with tape once again, because you really don't want to accidentally countersink the wrong hole. And so that's what I do. It's producing a lot of metal. That's why I keep vacuuming off the carpet there, and even sucking chips out from my countersink bit. And so, this step made me a little nervous. I've countersunk before, and I've practiced on various pieces, and I just wanted to make sure I got my cage dialed in exactly right. And so I made a test piece and adjusted it accordingly. And you can see a couple of times I'll fit that piece down into one of the holes that I've made as a test. Now I actually I get basically done and end up pulling a bunch of the clecos out and test fitting my little sample piece into one of the holes and clecoing it in to really sort of pull it in tight, and decide that I could stand to go another couple of thousandths deeper. So I end up, you'll see here, I do that, and then I end up pulling everything, well, not pulling everything back apart, but going along and doing like every other one. I adjust the cage down a couple more clicks and go just a little bit further. And so that's what I'm doing here. I'm fitting that test piece in and clecoing it in and looking at that gap. And that's where I decided, yeah, I can go a couple of thousandths more. So let me try that, get it in. Got satisfied, tried it on a couple more, and then I go ahead and put every other cleco in. Come through, drill each one a little more, and then swap them and do every other one. And then I flip it over and go back and do the same thing on the other side. So I think that's about it. I'm going to end this one here. I got a lot done on this particular day, and actually by the time I'm doing this voiceover now, it's been a little over a week, and I've actually made a lot more progress. So I'm going to go ahead and get to work putting that video together.